Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, so you can join our tech family. If it is informative to you, please like our video, share it with your friends so they can get help with these video, and don't forget to press all notification bell icon so you get regular update and don't miss our any single video.
www. World Wide Web. Commonly known as the web, is a collection of electronic hypertext documents stored in a computer, linked together like a spider's web, which can be accessed via internet. Let's take a live example to get an idea of how the web works. The web browser is a software program to access information from the web. For example, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, Chrome, etc. In a day, 3.3 billion searches happen on Google. Let's see exactly what happens when you type www.google.com and click enter on your web browser. The browser parses this URL into three parts: protocol name, server name, and the path to the page in the server. Blank space usually denotes the index as the path. By default, when a page request is made, it fetches the index.html page. Whereas a specific path, say about.html, is mentioned, it fetches about.html from the corresponding server. When this parsed URL comes out of the browser, it becomes an HTTP request, consisting of the following parts. Let us discuss these parts briefly. Request line consists of three components such as method, the path to the page on the server, and HTTP version. The method is used to forward the request to the server. The predominant methods used are GET and POST. A normal GET request looks like this, wherein the parameters such as username and password are passed on the URL. A typical POST request appears to be like this, in which all parameters are passed in the message body itself. By default, the first request method will be GET. However, the consecutive request method depends on the application, which may either be GET or POST. General headers consists of the timestamp of the request, the connection type between the client and the server that may be persistent or closed. Request headers consists of the domain name of the server, acceptable type of the page, either text, image, or application on HTML, the type of browser that initiated the request. Entity headers are optional and are followed by a carriage return or line feed to represent the demarcation between the headers and the message body. Message body contains the actual content. This HTTP request is then passed on to the router, from where it is routed to a proxy server. If set, the proxy server acts as a mediator between the client and the server to serve the following purposes: audit, for maintenance of network logs; internet usage, to report effective utilization of bandwidth; and caching, for speedy retrieval of the web pages. Generally, the request is forwarded to the firewall, but in some cases the proxy is placed after the firewall, that is, outside the network, in order to conceal the identity of the network. Now the request is passed onto the firewall that is conventionally designed to control ports and is allowed to gain access between the clients and the server. One may often get confused with terminologies such as proxy, firewall, and proxy firewall. Let's see the difference between a proxy and a firewall. When a proxy receives a request, it checks the access list for the application layer protocols. Based on this, the proxy forwards or blocks the request. When a firewall receives a request, it checks the access list for the ports. However, an application-level firewall also checks for programs in the access list. The request gets forwarded or dropped based on this list. When the request goes out of your network, the HTTP request header has the information of the domain name of the server, which it has to reach, but remains unaware of its IP location. For the very reason the request goes to the domain name server, the DNS translates the domain name to its corresponding IP address. Once it gets the server IP, the request is forwarded to the corresponding server. So, what is a server? As the name implies, it is a computer that serves the requests from the clients. What is a web server? When the server service, such as Apache, Tomcat, IIS, or Zeus, is installed on a computer, it becomes a web server capable of handling requests for the static pages. Installing services such as Oracle WebLogic or Glassfish over a web server will transform it into a web application server. This is capable of handling requests to process them based on the business logic and to respond accordingly. The business logic may be implemented using a web application or a web service. What is a web application? It is a program written using packages such as Java, PHP, Python, Ruby, etc. to accomplish a task. Example, Google Maps. What is a web service? When a web application uses open standards such as XML, SOAP, and HTTP to provide interoperability between applications running on different platforms, they are termed as web services. Consider an example, www.virustotal.com. This website fetches services from various antivirus web applications such as Bitdefender, Avira, Avast, etc. in order to give a consolidated report. What is a database server? Software such as MySQL, MSSQL, PostgreSQL, etc. provides database services to other programs like web applications and web services called a database server. In this case, our request www.google.com is for a static web page from google.com. The request for this static web page is handled by a web server. Suppose if the request is for a location on Google Maps, it will be processed by the web application server to fetch the corresponding result from the database, which is managed by the database server. When the request is for fetching a file from a server, it is handled by a file server. What is a file server? A computer installed with software such as FileZilla, Logical Dock, Cerberus FTP, etc., which is purposely designed for storing, sharing, and publishing files, is called a file server. This again uses the DB server to access the requested file from the DB and returns it back to the web server to produce the HTTP response. When the request is for sending or receiving a mail, it is handled by a mail server. What is a mail server? A computer installed with software such as Mercury Mail Transport System, HMail Server, etc. for handling mail requests and responses is called a mail server. When the request is to send emails, the mail server uses SMTP on port 25, and when the request is to receive, it uses POP3 on port 110. When the requests are processed by the corresponding servers, it generates corresponding responses where the actual HTTP response looks like this and consists of the following parts. Status line. The request line of the HTTP request is replaced by this status line in the response. It consists of the HTTP version. Status code is used for defining the state of the web application or the web page that has been requested for. This is clustered into 5 different groups. If the status code falls between 100 to 199, it is meant for experimental purpose. 200 to 299 shows successful page access. 300 to 399 denotes redirection of the request. 400 to 499 denotes client errors, and 500 to 599 denotes server errors. Reason phrase. A brief description of the status code. For example, status code 404 denotes client error and the corresponding reason phrase is page not found. General headers consists of the timestamp of the response and the connection type between the client and the server that may be persistent or closed. Response headers consists of the name and version of the server that hosts the domain. Accept ranges may be bytes or none. When it is none, the client needs to wait until all the elements of the web page are rendered. When it is bytes, the server allows partial loading of the elements of the web page. Entity headers consists of the content type, that gives information about the type of content in the body of the message. Content length denotes the length of the message. Last modified denotes the timestamp of the last update of the message. Message body, the actual response for the request. The response is then processed by the web browser to display the requested content. Next time when a user requests google.com, instead of fetching the response from the server, the browser processes the request using previously stored responses from web cache. A request that passes through a router, proxy, firewall, web server, web application server, and database server to fetch a response looks like a cruise missile, thus making us christen this structure of working as the cruise missile architecture.
We hope you enjoyed the video and found value in the content. We value your feedback. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to post them in the comments section or contact us directly via our social platforms. Thanks for watching.